Journalist Liz Farrell recently made a post about an incident involving Jane Doe number 2, where Jane alleges that while she was driving recently, my favorite idiot, Reginald Wayne Miller, was behind her honking his horn incessantly. Liz's post ended up in the Justice for Micah group, and a lovely woman sent me the link so I could enjoy the comments that followed. Reggie was the first to comment. He just couldn't sit on his little hand sticks, but instead had to get those fingers typing furiously, demanding that the admin take down the post. He even used all caps to make sure everyone knew he was gosh darn dangity tootin' serious. I guess that Reggie just couldn't be arsed to make it to court to defend himself about allowing sexual abuse in his church, but he is all gung-ho to defend himself on Facebook about the claim that he honked his horn. It seems like to him that's a more egregious act than what is alleged in the lawsuits that the two Jane Does filed. In his comments on the post, Reggie claimed that both Janes were lying and they just wanted money. He also claimed that John Paul had taken an FBI-approved lie detector test and passed. What exactly is an FBI-approved lie detector test? I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure it's a figment of Reggie's imagination. And even if John Paul did take a lie detector test, they aren't admissible in criminal court, so I don't know why they'd be allowed in civil court. Reggie continued by saying that he has letters from someone in Jamaica that claim that John Paul was in Jamaica on the date that Jane 1 said that she was assaulted. Reggie and his letters, man, he is obsessed. The best part of the claim was that Reggie said that John Paul was in Jamaica on his first mission trip. I don't know about you, but I know the first word I think of when I hear John Paul Miller's name is missionary. Are these people from Jamaica going to come to the States to testify? Because otherwise I think that's just hearsay. Then again, I'm not an attorney. What Reggie doesn't realize is that if he had lived his life to be an exemplary model of truthfulness, people would be more likely to believe him when he makes comments like this. But it's been proven that he lies. A lot. So he can say whatever he wants about the Janes, but I'm not going to believe anything that pops out of his lie hole. I will give credit to Reggie for spreading joy with his comments, because they did have several laugh reactions. Good job, Reggie, you sanctimonious bundle of sunshine. And Reggie's mini-me, John Paul, learned at the feet of his father. On September 23, 2025, an amended answer and counterclaim was filed by John Paul against Jane Doe 1. His answer was the same nonsense as before. The whole defendant lacks information, and he denies the same and demands strict proof thereof, written 296 times. But here's what he wrote as his counterclaim. Quote, "The defendant, John Paul, has been placed in significant harm as a direct result of the plaintiff's grossly negligent and intentional public accusations and rumors. These accusations, made with reckless disregard for their truth or falsity, have not only defamed the defendant's character, but have also incited a wave of libelous and slanderous statements by third parties. As a result, the defendant has endured an ongoing pattern of relentless cyberbullying and harassment. The plaintiff's actions have created a toxic environment in which the defendant is unjustly vilified in both public and private atmospheres, with significant emotional, reputational, and financial damage. The plaintiff's conduct constitutes intentional infliction of harm on the defendant, who has had to endure both offline and online attacks that have significantly impacted his personal and professional life." End quote. Oh, everyone feels sorry for John Paul. I'd love to know what the significant harm is. Was it the loss of his church? Because he lost that because of his own actions and words. And buying a church for $300,000 and then selling it for over $2 million is the kind of financial damage I'd like to endure. Maybe he means his marriage to Susie Q, but Jane 1 didn't force him to marry a baked potato, more specifically, a baked potato whose spouse died in a way that is being reinvestigated and who died while Tater Tot and Moldy Toes were allegedly having an affair. Here are the claims that John Paul gave on why his counterclaim is supposed to have merit. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll hit the highlights. In Statement 1, it reads, quote, "On or about May 2024, plaintiff falsely and with malice afterthought allowed a third party to record and publish an interview with plaintiff on one or more social media platforms." End quote. Now, you might think I misread afterthought, but I didn't. They wrote afterthought and not aforethought. I understand spell check not catching it, but rumpled Russ, can your office not put out a single document that doesn't have a typo? And I mean, this one kind of changes the entire meaning of the sentence, you dingy doink. The counterclaim continues with John Paul alleging that Jane Doe defamed him throughout that interview she gave back in May of 2024. He then claims that other media outlets picked it up and began reporting on it as well. Statement number 8 reads, quote, while plaintiff uses an alias for this action in fear of the repercussions of her name being released, plaintiff has had the benefit of remaining anonymous to avoid embarrassment, while defendant is completely exposed to the public online and in person for sexual assault, end quote. The reason that both Janes get to be anonymous is because they were the victims and are now the survivors. I think John Paul really wants to be a victim super bad, but he's not. His actions and his words have brought him exactly where he is today. He then goes on to claim that Jane 1 has harmed his reputation, which is a joke, and statements 9 through 11 read, quote, defendant is informed and believes that all social media outlets, including but not limited to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, will not remove the defamatory information except under the direction of plaintiff. Defendant will continue to suffer irreparable harm, damage, and injury unless the plaintiff is compelled to stop defaming defendant and to remove from social media all defamatory statements published by plaintiff and to third parties that use social media for journalism. Upon information and belief, defendant is entitled to a preliminary and permanent injunction of this court compelling plaintiff to cease these defamatory statements about defendant and to remove and forever delete any statements already made, end quote. So the thing is, if John Paul hadn't made his weird-ass announcement about Micah's death, I'm not sure that people from all over the world would even know who John Paul Miller was. That announcement was the spark that set off everything. There might have still been a local scandal, but I don't think it would have been as widespread. And isn't it funny that there's no mention of any letters from unnamed Jamaicans to prove that John Paul was there at the time of the alleged assault? And has either of the Janes made these posts that John Paul is claiming are defamatory? Or is it other people just sharing the legal court filing, the one that's publicly available for anyone to read? And why would anyone be forced to remove a legal public document? Is John Paul going to sue Allison for her affidavit that she filed in the emergency custody hearing last year? The one that ended with John Paul not even being able to visit his children? The one that both Janes are using in their cases? And if Jane 1's interview was in May of last year, there's a good chance it was before the emergency custody hearing was filed by Allison, because that was on May 23rd. So what was it Allison wrote in that affidavit again? Let's see. Statement 7 on the affidavit read, quote, JP told me that in addition to his affair with Micah, he had employed prostitutes and been sexually inappropriate with several underage female members of our church. He blamed his immoral sexual behaviors on the sexual abuse he experienced for years by his father, Wayne Miller. The church requested that JP enroll in an extensive sexual addiction program. However, despite him promising me that he would, to my knowledge, that never happened. Statement 9. After JP informed me that he had been inappropriate with minor female members of our church and disclosed to me the identity of these girls, I immediately contacted them to encourage them to come forward. Although they each shared with me detailed accounts of what JP did to them, they were too scared of JP to make a police report or testify in court. When I learned they were too fearful to report JP, I went to the police department for the purpose of making a report and requesting an investigation. However, I was in essence told by police officials that nobody would believe me because JP was a well-known pastor and we were in the middle of a divorce. Without the testimony of the victims, there was little else I could do to prove what JP had done and ensure he was held accountable. In Statement 14, JP began spending time with his now paramour Susie, who was the mother of one of the boys that plays on our son's soccer team. JP began using our son to facilitate time so he could spend with Susie, which our children were well aware of. Their friends talked about it, and it caused them a tremendous amount of embarrassment. When I learned JP was exposing our children to yet another one of his adulterous affairs, I confronted JP and Susie and told them not to let it happen again. JP called me the day Susie's husband died in an alleged drowning accident, extremely upset and asking me to pray, which was incredibly bizarre. Based upon information and belief, just 2 weeks prior to this incident, Susie's husband had confronted JP and asked him to leave his wife and children alone. It is chilling to know that the spouses of both Susie and JP are now dead from tragic events. End quote. So, John Paul, are you going to sue Allison for saying the very same thing that the two Janes are saying? And isn't it just so strange that 3 different women have sworn on legal documents that you sexually assaulted minors? But we're supposed to believe that you're the one telling the truth. The guy who's been caught in so many lies that if they were dollars, you could stop whining about financial ruin. Then you allegedly used the excuse that you assaulted minors because of the sexual abuse you endured by your father. The same guy that's named on those lawsuits and who is trying to tell everyone that you and he are the only ones telling the truth in this whole thing. I think if Freud was alive, he'd just throw up his hands and walk away at this point. Good luck getting everything forever deleted off the internet, though. Thank you so much for joining me in yet another jump into the cesspool that is the mind of the Myrtle Beach Millers. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.